What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the EBO video series, where we interview influential people within the iGaming sector about how they are dealing with the challenges of COVID-19. I'm Milan, the head of growth at EBO, and joining me today is Dom Wolf, our strategy director, and Quentin Martin. Quentin, welcome to the show. Let's kick it off by explaining perhaps a little bit to the audience about what Luckbox is and what your roles and responsibilities are.
Thanks for having me. I'm with Luckbox, Luckbox.com. We are an esports betting platform licensed on the Isle of Man. So we take bets on esports. So you can come to our platform, view any esports match that's going on because we have almost 100% coverage, and you can register and bet alongside to enjoy your experience. So think the Bet365 of esports.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Quentin, at what point did you feel this darn virus that is affecting us all was something that you guys will need to take a little bit more seriously? And what precautionary measures did you actually put in place?
So we're quite blessed in the sense of it's been good for us, and it feels weird saying that in such trying times that affect some of us so terribly. So firstly, I mean, a bit of my background, I guess, will feed into that. So I used to run the free-to-play gaming studio at PokerStars, and working in social gaming. At one point, there was a huge amount of buzz about virality and the study of essentially infectious diseases to study the growth rate of games. So when early COVID warnings came in of the coronavirus, I was paying pretty close attention, and to me, it seemed quite obvious early on where the world was headed. So we closed all of our offices around the world maybe 2 weeks prior to the lockdown, and sent everybody to work remotely with all of their equipment from the office. So we had everything in place before the lockdown hit. Everyone was ready, and because most of our team are kind of introverted developers, working from home isn't the biggest disruption in the world. So from a team, no, very little impact. From a company, we're blessed that it's been incredible. Our numbers are going through the roof. We are smashing records week on week. I mean, we're seeing, I'm going to attempt a pun, but an accurate one. We're seeing an exponential growth right now. And we're hiring. For example, we just hired somebody on Tuesday. So although basically because traditional sport is cancelled, and because everyone's in their houses right now, everyone who's 36 and under is a gamer, whether they're a diehard gamer such as myself, or a retired gamer, I guess, or whether they just play FIFA with their mates. They still love gaming. So they're back in their houses, they've got a PS4 or a PC, they realize they can chat to their mates on it, and that's getting them back into it. You see Twitch is up 60%.
Yeah.
And so people are watching it again. And then because the esports industry itself it took a hit, because a lot of it is driven by live events, that sell out stadiums, but they've managed to transition online. So ESL, the world's largest esports tournament organizer, is smashing its concurrent viewer records with every tournament. So as an industry, it's just booming right now. And, there's nothing better to do than enhance your enjoyment of a game than placing a bet on it whilst you're watching. So things have been fantastic for Luckbox as well.
Now, Dom, you actually deal with a lot of iGaming companies. I know you speak to them on a very regular basis. Is this consistent with what you're also finding in the industry?
It really depends on the sort of sector. So obviously sports betting has been massively affected. Esports is very different. It can work 24/7. As Quentin was saying, when lots of people are at home with not that much to do and they need to get away from work, because the life-work balance at the moment is so difficult for a lot of people, you do sometimes need to switch off the emails, switch off the phone, and just get away. So I think it's quite natural for esports to be booming so much. A lot of the casinos are reporting exactly the same as well. So it's obviously there is this negative. What coronavirus is an awful thing, but there is definitely a boom within things which allow people to get away from this sudden prison of our existence. So yeah, it's good. What I'm actually quite interested in, Quentin, is you're obviously running a digital business. How a lot of the gaming companies I've been speaking to are not digital companies in any shape or form. They're very basic sort of systems. A lot of the sports book is very sophisticated, but when you come down and when you see how customer service is operated, when you see how the offices are laid out, this has come as quite a shock. How's it really impacted you? What did you need to do a lot to digitalize essentially?
It's a good question, and I totally sympathize. I've been in the space for over a decade, and yeah, I mean, if you look at William Hill, which has so many
Mm.
physical shops, and there's so much legacy in the big companies. Luckbox is, we've only been around for 2 years, and our Alex, our CTO, who, if you just think the lead character from iRobot, and you're spot on, and I say that with love. He's all of our tech is like humming. It's so futuristically good. So honestly, we've needed to do nothing to prepare all transition. Most of our, because we've got offices all over the world, so most of our meetings are almost always online or in multiple countries. So the disruption to our business has been close to non-existent, beyond being able to fly and talk at conventions and raise funds and stuff like that. So but yeah, I totally sympathize for companies that have that just haven't been digital. What was I doing recently? I was doing some share certificates, and I needed to print them off, wet sign them, and then send them to somebody else. And I was like, how is this still the way that this is done in this day and age? So I think, as to look at the silver lining, I think that this pandemic will force digitalization on a bunch of processes where it was just fighting to resist. I think even simple things like, in the UK at least, broadband potentially being recognized as a human right, and maybe something that is provided by the government, because of people have known for years that schools can't do pure online homework or emails, and because not everybody, something like 7% of the UK still doesn't have access to decent internet. So I think that there are going to be some goods to come from this, once we all are allowed back out and can hug each other again.
I could not agree more. I think I think coronavirus has pushed through the process of digitalization in so many different sectors, and I think it's probably done more for digitalization of the way people work than any board has done in 15 years or 20 years. It's been it's unbelievable. The only thing which really does worry me is the separation between work and life and family. It's not really happening at the moment, and I think part of that is because people can't go on holiday, or they can't go outside of their house, essentially. And that's quite where people are just working all the time. I think it takes quite strong leadership to come in and actually tell people that they should not be working at certain points of the day.
I completely agree. Work-life balance, which has always been tough, is even tougher right now, especially with people who have kids who are relying on nurseries and other people to take care of them. They've suddenly, their life had a certain amount of hours, and now it's expanded to more hours than they are awake, and trying to find a new balance. So if companies can't go out to their team and say, hey, please feel free to come to us and say if you want to work fewer hours or more flexible hours. So, I mean, one of my ethoses as a people manager has always been flexibility. I've never set a 40-hour work week for anyone in my team. I've never set, as long as you're doing your work and you're there for the meetings when you need to be, and you're obviously presentable and decent. I don't care if you're working for an internet cafe in Mali, But to come back to the question you had about digitalization, so I remember when I was working at PokerStars, and I was working on the mobile product development when this was the first mobile gambling app that was developed, and Isai, the owner at the time, was terrified that it would cannibalize his existing base. And what he missed there was that mobile is a natural transition of use. It's not like if people spend fewer time in front of their laptop and more on their mobile, then it will cannibalize. But that's just a natural usage progression. And you asked about how digitalized we were. The beautiful thing about esports is it's one of the few industries on the planet that is so divisive by age. If you are 35 and younger, and someone says, and I say, hey, I work in esports, the answer I normally get is, wow, that is awesome. Tell me about it. If you're 36 and older, the answer I normally get is, what? And it's that simple. Nothing else is that divisive. Even mobile phones. My gran has an iPhone. So it's not. So what that's caused is, in the esports betting industry, every trend in the gambling space that has been changing, move to mobile, move to in-play, minute markets, the need for streaming, the need for the ADHD now of the younger generations is expanded and more apparent in esports. It's the microcosm of the cutting edge of the gambling industry. So all of the challenges that these big companies are facing, we face every day because we have to do it for our audience. So we're actually creating kind of best of breed processes and setups and whatnot, such that our likeliest exit strategy is to be acquired by one of the big gambling companies who recognizes that they need to acquire the Generation XYZ customer. And obviously, one of my favorite stats is that 18 to 25-year-olds watch more computer games than they do traditional sports before COVID-19. So this stat, I mean, there is 50 years of inevitable growth as those 18-year-olds become 68-year-olds playing in retirement homes. I know I'm going to play computer games in my retirement home when I'm old. Is esports growing? Inevitably. Will traditional gambling companies have to get into it? Inevitably. So right now we just represent the cutting edge. So all those really fine challenges, whether they're technological or mostly technological, or from changing customer needs, like, should the sportsbook look like the spreadsheet of the 1990s where it was, chalked up on next to the horse track and has just evolved online to a spreadsheet, or should it actually look like a rich modern interface that the kids these days are used to? So we just, it's more challenging and more rewarding as a result.
Brilliant. Quentin, I wanted to touch on one specific thing you said. You talked about the natural transition of technology. And I wanted to touch on the topic of the natural transition of the customer journey. As you know, many people in the UK, and I'm sure all over the world, can no longer go into the high street gambling places that they used to. The way that organizations are dealing with the customer journey is fundamentally going to change. And now with technology and our dependence on technology being higher than ever, how do you feel things such as AI can potentially change the way iGaming companies interact with their customers going forward?
Massively. So firstly, the costs are going up in iGaming. I mean, primarily driven by licenses, and so those are going up massively, taxes up, etc. So you have to either accept a reduction of profit margin or find massive cost optimizations. And you touched upon two, which is staff, both in your operations teams, so your customer support, security, fraud, etc. And also in your trading teams of the sportsbook. I was reading a great article for Goldman Sachs, and it was looking, I can't remember which of their teams, I think it was their futures FX trading team. It used to be, at the millennium, it was 600 traders. Today it is 2. And that's not because it's diminished. I mean, there are about 300 developers in that team now, because it's shifted to data-driven AI, etc. So the same thing is happening in sportsbooks. I still think for a while yet that having a human overlord overseeing things is good, but eventually that won't be necessary. I'm under no illusions that computers will be better than humans. But so rather than, you get so many companies that have 600 strong trading teams in Eastern Europe, and that's just inefficient. It can't react more quickly, and it's just not going to be as good as algorithms and fewer, more educated traders sitting on top. Fraud, recognizing fraud patterns, and again, this is just data analysis, like whether it's analyzing IP or passwords or frequency or mouse movements or behavioral patterns. These are all things that computers can do better than humans. And any subject cases, false positives can obviously be reviewed by the people who are coding the algorithms and improving the setups, especially if you're using neural networks, you don't know what the black box is, etc. So I absolutely see it, and marketing as well, especially for larger operators who have huge volumes, blessed to have huge volumes of customers, micro segmentation, because you might like Manchester United, but not the rest of football. You might like only Federer in tennis. You might love all of CSGO when it comes to esports. And that's a very different profile from probably anybody else. But an algorithm can figure that out quite quickly and serve you the relevant content for yourself, especially based on where you are on player life cycle, LTV, churn cycles, etc. So, I've used, as we said in the preamble, I've worked in the past when I was doing free-to-play gaming on using machine learning to optimize microtransactions, so to segment the audience and optimize all the price points depending on where you are in the world, in your life cycle of the game, etc. So I see technology being the solution in many cases. Not all. It can be tough to scale in technology. It can often come up with a higher upfront cost. But I think if you embrace technology as part of your DNA, as corny as that sounds, then that can be. And I think that's what we've done. Is we're a really young company. I think our average age is 32, and we're very technologically driven. Our guys are always always optimizing processes, which is fantastic. That makes my heart sing. So yeah, I see technology always being a driver here.
I've got to say, Quentin, talking to you, I think you're definitely an anomaly from a lot of the companies, naming no names, of who I've spoken to.
I was just going to say, Don, that you speak to so many iGaming companies, and I'm sure that the culture you see in all of these places is very different to what Quentin was saying.
Yeah, I mean, Quentin did touch on a few things which are really important. One is there is a rising cost base. Part of this is to do with marketing costs, partly to do with compliance. Margins are being pushed downwards. There is a need for companies to be innovative and start looking at different areas to basically make money. Be that in different countries, be that going to Asia, like to go to Japan. That's quite a hot topic at the moment. Technology can provide an answer for that. You can open up in a country like Japan where you don't need to hire 10 Japanese call center people in Malta. Technology and artificial intelligence can be an answer to that. But I think the word artificial intelligence really scares people who generally do not understand the technology or advanced technology, and they do not understand how it can be implemented to really help them. A lot of the conversations I'm having with gaming companies at the moment is they're not interested in doing anything, they're not interested in optimizing, they're interested in surviving and making sure they have the processes to survive right now. Mm-hmm. Ironically, a lot of them have said to me they wish they'd automated a lot of their customer service and customer support 6 months ago, because then the last month or 6 weeks would have been so much easier if 70% of the traffic had been dealt with by a virtual agent or something. So I think there is a shift in understanding which is taking place, partly due to coronavirus and what automation can do. But again, we are talking about quite low tech, and we are talking about a process which is going to take years and years and years. I do think technology and artificial intelligence has a huge part to play in ensuring these gaming companies remain profitable. And I think it's going to take some time still to get to that point with the actual companies understanding that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I think that makes sense. I mean, I think the iGaming space is, because there's so much consolidation driven by the rising compliance costs, it's much harder to enter as a new operator, because it's normally the new blood that brings in the technological revolutions going forward. But there's less space to do that from a B2C perspective. So I think that more innovations will come from people who understand the industry, go, this particular process is done stupidly in the current setup. They go away, create a technological driven solution to it, and then market it B2B to the existing customers in the place. So it's a bizarre change where it's not like new companies, it's not like, you know, oak trees and acorns, with the acorns coming up and dislodging the incumbents. I think the incumbents are going to be quite hard to be disrupted for a while, but you'll have the ability to aid and shift on a B2B perspective, because every CEO in the space that I know of the big companies, I mean, they're not stupid. They're not stupid people. They're driven people. They want their company to, they want to move in those directions. But there are so many priorities on their plate that optimizing things like transitioning your customer support team to the majority to a bunch of coders coding a chatbot, right, or keeping on top of a chatbot, so to speak, which is almost certainly the right way to go, is not going to save you as much money, because you just outsourced everything to Bangladesh or Bulgaria or something like that. So you already dealt with that cost center, so you can focus on going into the US or dealing with the change in regulation in Sweden, or or whatever the burning issues are. So it's much harder to focus on these edge things.
I could not agree more. That's exactly what I'm saying. It's it's interesting because a lot of the fintech companies over the last 5 years have built their entire companies to successful big companies like Monzo and Revolut, and all these companies have been so successful because they realize that marketing and customer support is one and the same thing. It's the cheapest marketing you can do. Having automation, a first degree layer of automation, allows you to really have the customer support teams there for when people need to speak to someone and be dealt with very quickly. I think gaming companies underestimate how annoying it is when AML process kicks off and you can't get hold of someone to free up your money. And it really does turn people off brands very quickly. And being able to free up the manpower to really take care of people's needs when they happen is critical, I think, in having any longevity.
I completely agree, Dom. Now, Quentin, you quite rightly said that a lot of iGaming companies have so many priorities. Perhaps it might be launching in a new territory, for example, to win new business as opposed to process optimization, even though we all know that process optimization is ultimately what is going to drive sustainability and scalability for these organizations. So from your perspective, if a CEO of an iGaming organization is listening to this right now and on their plate, they probably have 10 things. Now, AI and automation is one of those things. What advice would you actually give to the CEO of an iGaming organization who is listening to this, but perhaps isn't giving AI and automation the priority or preference that it needs, even though it may be the very thing that may help them scale their iGaming organization to where they need to be or want to be within the next 2 to 5 years?
Invest in esports. No. Look, it's a tough question. I think some of the biggest challenges is the legacy of their tech platforms, and it's such a trying thing. I mean, if you look at Windows, the shift from Windows 3 to 95, from 95, it's huge to change essentially an operating system and all what's going on, because the cogs are working right now. Why would you break it? And so you have to continually manage this updating process where you're always behind the times, but you've got the client base you're working to these new shiny things. And an analogy someone gave me a while ago was, when you look at a company from the outside, it looks good, it looks shiny, you see processes that work. And when you look at the same company from the inside, you see people with their fingers in the cracks and duct tape sticking over everything. And and it doesn't, and that's every company in the world.
Yes.
Like, even new companies look like that. You're faced with a decision and you go like, should we do this the right way, which will take longer, or should we do the hack solution? And every developer in the room will go like, oh, not the hack solution. And you'll generally do a compromise. So you're always building technical debt. So what was your question? What to focus on? I would always focus, this is going to sound cliche again, I would focus on the user and what need of theirs are you satisfying? And I know that sounds like business 101, but you get lost in the fact that you have a product that you are selling to them rather than what are their needs and what do they want. Like, realizations that your competitor isn't. So I mean, again, I use at esports, our competitor isn't necessarily Bet365. Our competitor is Netflix. Our competitor is maybe even some of the games that these people are playing. Like, when we were looking at marketing, it's like, do we want to market to people who love esports or love the computer games, or do we want to find those people who want to bet on them? And it's this is our customer. If we were having a discussion, there's a piece of software that trains people at first-person shooters to aim better, and we could get marketing space in this. And we realized that that's not probably the user. He's not going to be like, oh, I'm trained to get better at this game, but I've got this gambling advert. Like, it's not quite the right fit. So what to focus on internally? Always stay abreast of, look at your new customers. Like, these big gambling companies are, can't think of the right word right now. They're long-term companies. They will still be here in 20 years' time, probably. So that their time horizon is much larger. They can look at long-term strategy, which is tough, especially if you're public and focusing on the next quarter. So realizing that, yes, right now, your revenue is being driven by your 50 to 70-year-old category who likes whatever they like. And I would look focus a lot more about where your younger customers are coming, are focusing on what their demands are. And by catering to them, you will automatically trickle down through the rest of your organization and set yourself up much better in the long term.
Wise words. Well, look, Quentin, thank you so much from everyone at EBO, from myself and Dom, for sharing your thought leadership, for really helping other organizations and other senior directors and CEOs that will be listening in on this video series about your thought leadership, about your experience, about where you see the future of iGaming, automation, and many of the things that we spoke about. I really appreciate you sharing your strategies, stories, and secrets about how you are dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. So on that note, let's wrap up here, and thank you so much for joining us.